Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Will Wexler and I'm the Senior Director of the Rafik Hariri Center in Middle East Programs at the Atlantic Council. Today is a day where all eyes are, of course, on Ukraine, except for those who are watching this event, because the issues of the Mediterranean and North Africa, the relationship between the US and Italy is important now. It was important yesterday and it will be critically important in the future. Both in the context of what's happening to the east, but also to what's happening to the south. So let me start off by thanking the U.S. Embassy in Rome for partnering with the Atlantic Council to help make this event possible. And today's event is part of a series of how increased U.S.-Italy engagement can impact countries throughout the Mediterranean, especially in North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt, as they face ongoing political and economic challenges. Our mission here at the Atlantic Council is to galvanize U.S. leadership and engagement in the world, always in partnership with our allies and partners, to shape solutions to global challenges. And in that spirit, we believe in engaging our European allies can improve our collective policies towards countries in North Africa. Our work at the Atlantic Council is led by Karim Mesran and his very capable team that tackles the challenges in all of these countries. And our panel today will explore how the United States and its European allies can engage in a more coordinated approach to the ongoing instability, political turmoil, and economic opportunities facing the North Africa region. We're going to kick off today's discussion with Thomas Smitham, who's the Chargé d'Affaires at the U.S. Embassy in Rome. Thomas was formerly the Chargé at the U.S. Embassy in Trinidad and Tobago and political minister counsel at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Mr. Wexler, and thank you very much to the Atlantic Council and frankly to our own team here at the Embassy for helping to put this together. It is a really timely topic at a really important moment, and I know we're going to hear from a lot of important experts, and we'll hear from our own Karen Sasahara, our Deputy Assistant Secretary, who will go into more detail. Look, we're here at a very interesting moment. It's quite a somber day, actually. Before diving in, I do want to acknowledge this blatant attack on Ukraine by Russian forces. And I also want to thank Italy, and the topic today is Italy-US relations and collaboration. I want to thank Italy for the steadfast support of the Western Alliance and the alliance with the US. Within moments of the attack, both Prime Minister Draghi and Foreign Minister Di Maio came out in strong support of Ukraine and transatlantic harmony and resolve. Across the political spectrum here, I've also been gratified to see the same sort of unified support for Ukraine. The President obviously will speak more about this today, and this is a conference on North Africa, so we'll leave that mostly to the side. But the violation of Ukraine's territorial integrity does relate directly to the topic of today's discussion, because the US and others have long voiced concern over the Russian Wagner's group work in Libya. Wagner's presence in Libya not only undermines stability there, but across Libya's southern border in the Sahel. Wagner is not in Libya or Mali to promote security or stability. It's there to promote instability for profit. As current events make clear, U.S. and transatlantic cooperation on this topic is extremely important. In the Middle East and North Africa, where values we share with our partners and allies, like respect for human rights, commitment to democratic institutions, and promotion of the rule of law, they underpin our engagement in the region. And I know my colleague Karen will talk more about the Biden administration's objectives in the region. For example, on Libya, where we believe that people get the right to choose their own governments, and we're promoting stability and look forward to elections in Libya. Over the 3 years that I've been here, most of my foreign policy discussions with the government have centered around the greater Mediterranean and in particular, Libya. all of our discussions relate to how we can jointly promote stability in the region. Our military forces in Italy do that. Our diplomatic activity in the region does that. We, in my recent discussions with Italian officials, we've also agreed that it's not just the countries that border the Mediterranean that are important. There's a huge importance to the Sahel and the Horn of Africa, and this is why we are working with them to promote diplomatic engagement in the region. As you probably know, the Italians have opened up embassies, increasing number of embassies in the Sahel, and are very focused on promoting economic growth and stability in that region. And that provides another area for collaboration with the United States and our transatlantic partners. I can tell you that we are working in close collaboration with our European colleagues, including Italy, on this range of issues. This is something that is a forefront in U.S. policy. It's a forefront of what we do every day in our mission in Italy and throughout the region. And let me just say again that we really couldn't have a better partner in focusing on these issues than Italy. Italy is key to our engagement in North Africa, the Sahel, Horn of Africa. Let me just close there because we've got some really interesting panelists who bring a lot of expertise to this discussion. I'm just very pleased that we were able to help catalyze this event and promote this event through our mission with our colleagues at the Atlantic Council and of course, our colleagues at the Department of State. Thank you very much. I'll close there.
Thank you very much, Thomas. That was really great. We really appreciate our collaboration and our partnership together, working on these issues that are really so central in so many ways to the U.S. relationship with our European allies and with Italy in particular. I'd now like to introduce Deputy Assistant Secretary Karen Sasahara. She has served in this post, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for North Africa, since November 2020. Prior to that, she was the charge at the U.S. Embassy in Amman. She was the Consul General in Jerusalem. She is really the person that I go to and I listen to whenever I want to learn about where the Biden administration and the U.S. government is on all of these critical issues. And so we're very fortunate to have her speaking with us here today. So Karen, over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and a special hello to friends and colleagues at Embassy Rome and also at our Italian colleagues. We regret that you are not able to come, but we understand that we've all woken up to a very different world, certainly Europe today. I did want to make a few remarks to follow up on what Thomas has said. We'd be remiss if we didn't. And so if I could just follow on saying that yesterday evening, President Biden condemned this unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces by saying that President Putin has chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic loss of life and human suffering. Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction this attack will bring, and the United States and its allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. The world will hold Russia accountable. The United States and European allies remain steadfast in their support for Ukraine's independence and sovereignty. It's critical to recognize the nature of our relationship with NATO. This morning, Secretary Blinken joined President Biden in a virtual G7 leaders meeting from the White House to discuss the ongoing situation. May God look after the people of Ukraine. Again, Will, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you to the Atlantic Council North Africa Initiative for organizing this event and for the opportunity to discuss a subject that I deal with every day, change and continuity in North Africa. While much has changed since my earlier days as the State Department desk officer for Tunisia and Libya, some issues have stayed the same or not changed enough. Tensions have risen again between Morocco and Algeria. Libyans still don't have the government that they deserve. Tunisians are struggling to achieve that model of governance embedded in the rule of law. We also see the inward focus of North African countries on their own domestic agendas, which is understandable. but driven and decided by the elites, which may or may not include democracy or human rights. And that makes one old idea timeless and still relevant: the importance of transatlantic partnership and cooperation. So I'd like to talk about the challenges facing the countries in North Africa and the areas of opportunity for the transatlantic relationship. In September 2021, Morocco saw the defeat of the incumbent Islamist-leaning government and a smooth transition of power to a government that's closer to the monarchy and business-oriented. This new government is focused on implementing the king's reform agenda, including addressing bread-and-butter issues related to socioeconomic reform, COVID-19 recovery, job creation, and infrastructure development. However, some things haven't changed. Speech critical of the king, Islam, or Morocco's approach to Western Sahara continues to be suppressed. The Moroccan government has detained prominent journalists, human rights activists, and other critical voices, creating a chilling effect on freedom of expression and normal political discourse. We have highlighted this issue both in private engagements and public statements. Such frank exchanges will remain an important element of our broad bilateral relationship. On security and stability, Morocco remains a key regional partner, both in terms of counterterrorism and regional security. And every year it hosts African Lion, the largest military exercise in Africa. On other fronts, Morocco has demonstrated strong leadership in Africa on climate change and is a world leader in renewables, consistently exceeding its targets. By 2030, Morocco will have 63% of its energy needs met by renewable energy sources. Economically, Morocco is an important trade partner for the United States, and our free trade agreement, the only one in Africa, and that just celebrated its 16th year. With the Tangier Med port project now the largest shipping port in Africa, Morocco will remain a key country to access new markets in Africa for both the United States and Mediterranean countries like Italy. Next door, in Algeria, the international community continues to benefit from Algeria's effective actions and vigilance against terrorism and violent extremism. Like Morocco and Italy, Algeria is a leading member of the Global Counterterrorism Forum for ensuring the development and propagation of best practices. As the host of Afripol, Algeria is also helping to enhance African police cooperation and stop the transnational criminal networks that drive so much instability across the region and the continent. While the horrors of its dark decade continue to recede, Algeria is not free from internal tensions. Lackluster turnout in elections last year reflected public frustration following the unprecedented Hirak protests. The government quelled resurgent protests and has taken steps to prevent another round of them by arresting activists in advance to the third anniversary. We are also mindful of other, more subtle difficulties faced by independent media and civil society that result from how NGO and press registration laws are implemented. In our private engagements with Algerian officials and through tools like the Human Rights Report, we continue to work with the Algerian government in the spheres of human rights and rule of law. Planned visits from British and Dutch special envoys on religious freedom will also help draw greater attention to these issues. I note that tensions between Algeria and Morocco have risen. Disagreement about the status and resolution of the Western Sahara is a main factor, but we are hopeful that the resumption of the UN-led political process under personal envoy to the Secretary General, Staffan de Mistura, can ease the tension and move the process forward towards a lasting resolution. We remain fully engaged diplomatically in support of this UN effort, together with our international partners, to reinforce a credible political process leading to an enduring and dignified resolution. Continuing eastward, the Tunisian people face mounting economic challenges. Tunisia now has the highest unemployment rate since the 2011 revolution. It's about 20%. And the average Tunisian is questioning the tangible benefits of their decade-old democratic experiment. We look to the Tunisian government and people to develop and protect their political structures, their institutions, and for the government to be transparent and implement the reforms the country desperately needs to stay afloat economically. The U.S. goal remains to support Tunisia's return to democratic governance in the swiftest time frame possible. In December, President Said announced a timeline for political reform, including a referendum and parliamentary elections by the end of the year. This announcement was welcome, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done and a lot of details to be finalized. We continue to urge the Tunisian government to include civil society and diverse political voices, including political parties that oppose the president, in this reform process. Civil society remains a strong tradition in Tunisia and is more important than ever during this period of change and uncertainty. U.S. assistance that equips civil society to advocate for government transparency and accountability is critical to push back on undemocratic measures and strengthen Tunisian democracy in the long term. President Said campaigned in 2019 on a pledge to root out corruption. The popularity of his actions reflects a widely held belief that corrupt elites remain embedded in state institutions, using them as sinecures and vehicles for personal profit, while the living standards of ordinary people have plummeted. Tunisia managed to paper over structural troubles by swelling the public payrolls, but a day of reckoning is drawing ever nearer. Tunisia needs reform now. It also needs institutions to build a resilient democracy. Getting the balance right is hard, but the United States and Italy have worked together with other countries to urge Tunisia's leaders to enact reforms. In that vein, we're coordinating with like-minded international partners to help Tunisia address urgent socioeconomic challenges, such as a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit and migration. In Libya, the public wants presidential and parliamentary elections. They've been waiting for the better part of a decade for political leaders to come together and agree on a system of governance far from the strongman dictator model of Muammar Gaddafi. The United States supports the Libyan people's demand to build a democratic Libya through free and fair elections as soon as possible. But while we and international partners such as Italy can use our influence to support this goal, this process must be Libyan-led and owned. We hope for a unified and secure Libya, free of foreign intervention, with a government able to fulfill its duties to the Libyan people through a shared respect for rule of law. We also support international efforts to improve human rights and accountability in Libya. We remain concerned about an estimated 900,000 vulnerable migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers, some of who are often subjected to egregious human rights abuses and who remain in need of humanitarian assistance. Our transatlantic partnership has played a central role in achieving the progress made thus far, a ceasefire and political process that has shifted the focus from violent confrontation to political negotiation. This partnership remains crucial to maintaining this momentum so that the Libyan people can finally achieve their desire to choose their leaders through free and fair elections. Turning to Egypt, the Biden-Harris administration moved our human rights engagement and dialogue front and center of the bilateral relationship. Recently, there have been some positive developments, such as the launch of an Egyptian national human rights strategy, the release of some high-profile political detainees, strengthened laws against female genital mutilation and sexual harassment, increased registration for new churches, and lifting the state of emergency in place since 2017. However, we continue to have serious concerns about human rights in Egypt, including curtailment of most forms of political dissent, as well as freedom of association, peaceful assembly, expression, the press, and the internet. Egypt is understandably focused on domestic issues, such as meeting the needs of its growing population. The Nile supplies 97% of Egypt's water, and Egyptian concerns about future water shortages have increased tension among Cairo, Khartoum, and Addis Ababa over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. In cooperation with Italy and other EU members, we believe it is possible to reconcile Egypt's water security needs, Sudan's dam and operational safety concerns, as well as Ethiopia's development goals. But reconciling these national perspectives and goals will require careful trust building and diplomacy. On the strategic front, the United States and the EU have shared interest in maintaining security in the Eastern Mediterranean and Red Sea. Egypt plays an important role in these efforts. And in recent years, we have seen a significant increase in Egypt's desire to coordinate with the United States and European countries on maritime and border security. For example, last year, Egypt joined the Combined Maritime Forces, of which Italy is a member. Egypt is actively seeking a stronger role in these activities. Ensuring the security of Eastern Mediterranean and Red Sea not only allows for safe passage of our commercial and military vessels from terrorist threats, but also disrupts illicit drug and human trafficking into Europe. To achieve our shared objectives with respect to the region, we must continue working to strengthen transatlantic cooperation. In the end, countries in the region will have to solve their core problems, but we can support them in doing so and can support them more effectively together. With partners like Italy, our common values and belief in a rules-based democratic order stand in marked contrast to those competitors who would destabilize the region through military opportunism and economic coercion. For the challenges I've discussed, solutions lie in greater cooperation with like-minded partners committed to a prosperous, sustainable, and democratic future. I hope that together we can help the region maintain continuity with positive developments while embracing additional change, especially on climate, human rights, and democracy. So thank you once again to the Atlantic Council for organizing this event and for the opportunity to speak with you all. I look forward to the panel discussion.
Well, good morning, everyone. I would like to start off by thanking our keynote speaker, Mrs. Zahara, for her wonderful remarks, very deep and exhaustive. Thank you very much, Karen, for all your what you're doing for the community and for North Africa and for your country. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the U.S. Embassy in Rome for their partnership with the Atlantic Council and with the North Africa initiative in particular, and in helping make today's event possible. Thank you very much to all the friends at the embassy in Rome. Unfortunately, we chose a day, a very particular day, very busy for many officials. And in fact, Mr. Amendola, the Italian minister for European Affairs at the Italian President of the Council of Ministers, Vincenzo Amendola, cannot join us. He has been practically drafted to the President of the Council, and he cannot be with us today. But we have immediately after the person that is the most appropriate and the most valid one to give us an assessment of the main topic that you're going to face, you're going to afford today, which is the Italian role in the various crises, the possibility that a strengthened relationship with the United States can provide a possible solution or a big help to solve some of the main crises. Dr. Alfredo Conte is currently the Principal Director for the Mediterranean and the Middle East at the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Alfredo, what, in your opinion, does a stronger transatlantic partnership on North Africa look like, and how can it be implemented?
Thank you, Karim, and thanks a lot to the friends who are here joining today and the Atlantic Council for organizing this initiative. It's a great pleasure and it's a privilege to be here with you. I would also like, by sharing a few comments, since both Thomas and Karen have done so, just to echo what they've said on voicing also in my turn, although this is not geographically speaking my area of competence, the solidarity and the support with the people and with the institutions of Ukraine for the attack they are suffering. This is, of course, more than just an attack against the sovereignty, the integrity of a country, which, as I said, we fully support and we are trying our best to uphold. It's a wider confrontation, and in this confrontation, there is no doubt which side Italy is on. And not only the government, I think the whole civil society in Italy is on the side of the values we share, and the rules we believe need to be supported. So let there be no doubt about that and the steadfastness of our support for that. And even though our minds and our eyes, as was said at the beginning, are now mostly focused on the East, we are here to talk about an area which is very important for my country, North Africa, or the Mediterranean at large. I believe that there is a lot to unpack when it comes to the transatlantic partnership in this region. I will try to explain why. First of all, as already the previous speakers were alluding at, we cannot look at North Africa in isolation. I mean, first of all, this is Europe's southern neighborhood, but it's also from an Italian and European perspective, the entry point, the African continent. And the political dynamics of North Africa are inextricable from those of the Sahel, from those of the Arab world, and from the greater Middle East at large. For Italy, our North African partners are part and parcel of the Mediterranean space. This is an area which directly affects our national security, and we believe it is of vital importance for the security of Europe as a whole. The main implication for the topic we are discussing is that to be effective, the transatlantic partnership on North Africa must take stock of this multifaceted reality and on the fact that we all have a stake, both Europe and the United States, in each of these dimensions and how they interact with each other. Secondly, we are at the end of a decade of revolution, conflict, societal and economic upheaval, a transformation which started in Tunisia 11 years ago and is still ongoing. These trends continue to affect all the countries of the region, yet in different ways and in different trajectories. And I will not repeat, which is because I fully subscribe to what Karen said when outlining the situation in the various countries of this area. So a strong partnership between the United States and Europe should be based on the ability to forge common goals that are firmly rooted in a common understanding of these seismic changes and their differentiated impact across North Africa. I will also add to this the need to be aware of the shift in the overall geopolitical environment, the challenges this pose to the rules-based international order. Not just increased great power competition, but increased room for maneuver for global and regional players, competitors, as was said, to pursue their destabilizing agendas, including in Northern Africa. As to the specific questions on the role the Italian diplomacy can play, I think we are at a very good place, but we still with margins for further improvement. As Karen said, we were supposed to be in Washington today, and eventually our plans had to be rescheduled due to events further east. Karen herself was in Rome a few days ago for a meeting with other representatives from other partners on Libya, which just took place at the beginning of February. This just to give you an idea how close and how assiduous our cooperation is. As I said, the region should be regarded as a whole and in its many interconnections and in the interdependencies with other areas, taking also into account the peculiarity of countries and areas. I will now focus in particular on two countries which are particularly relevant from an Italian perspective and to some extent also representative of the region as a whole, Libya, unsurprisingly, and Tunisia. On Libya, I would like to emphasize how essential was the US engagement in close coordination with Europe, especially since the cessation of hostilities in 2020. This was really critical. We are working hand in hand with our American partners in order to forge a path towards sustainable stabilization, reunification and reconciliation, and safeguarding the democratic aspirations of the Libyan people by pushing for elections. It is true that unfortunately elections were postponed at the end of last year, but we need to keep this perspective of elections alive to make sure that they will take place as early and as soon as possible. And there is full convergence on this point between transatlantic partners. On Tunisia, which is a country facing an extremely delicate scenario, both politically, economically, as Karen just reminded us, coordination between the two sides of the Atlantic has also been as close as it has been fruitful, as demonstrated by the successive G7 statements over the last few months, joined also by the EU. Where can we improve our partnership? I will make an example related to Libya to show how the convergence we see today is certainly very different and for the better from the scenario we faced in 2019 when the third civil war started. We must continue to look at the 2019 case as a cautionary tale of how outside actors with destabilizing agendas can effectively exploit our differences to pursue their narrow interests. In this framework, Italian diplomacy has always been at the forefront of efforts to forge greater unity of purpose in North Africa between the two sides of the Atlantic. And there I would also like to express once more the appreciation of the convergence we always had on the US side. For us, I repeat, this is not just a question of national interest, it is a question of national security. Imagine, for instance, where we would be today without strong transatlantic cooperation when it comes to the fight against terrorism and extremism. Today, the Islamic State is no longer a major threat in Libya, thanks to a major contribution by the United States. But just a few years ago, they controlled Sirte, and they threatened Italy just from a few hundred kilometers away. This, I think, demonstrates better than anything else what our partnership can achieve, but it reminds us at the same time how much we still yet to achieve to stabilize Libya and to put this area in a better position to address the many daunting challenges which characterize it.
Thank you very much, Alfredo. Exactly what I was expecting. Thanks very much for these exhaustive remarks. I pass now to Stephen Cook, who's currently a senior fellow for Middle East and Africa Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, author of many books, and one of the main experts, I should say, in DC, not only regarding the Middle East, but also the Washington vision of what the Middle East is and does and should be. Stephen.
Well, thank you so much, Kareem. It's a great pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you to Will Wexler for the invitation, for all of your staff to make this possible. Of course, when you issued the invitation, you didn't realize there would be war on the European continent once again. But I see that you do have more than a quorum, and those hardy folks who remain interested in the Middle East and North Africa even today. So it's great to be speaking with them. I see even some old friends among those who are zooming in. I have to say I was extremely pleased to receive this invitation, because ever since I came to Washington, first as a graduate student, I had long believed that it was short-sighted for the United States to relegate North Africa to an afterthought. Of course, with the exception of Egypt, as an afterthought in U.S. policy. But of course, during that era in the 1990s, the United States was too busy forging peace between Israelis and Palestinians, obsessing about Iraq and wondering what to do about Iran, and otherwise kind of gearing up to think about how to transform the region. Something that a habit I don't think that we've necessarily gotten out of, but there is a recognition of the importance of North Africa, in large part because of what happened in December 2010, extending into January 2011, particularly in Tunisia. Most people in Washington, D.C., unless they were World War II history buffs, knew nothing about Sidi Bouzid. Now, almost everybody, at least everybody in that immediate era, understood the importance of Sidi Bouzid to the future of Tunisian politics. All that being said, there were a range of issues that were manifest in North Africa that were always important to the United States, even if the region was somewhat of a secondary area for U.S. foreign policy. Those, of course, were energy, counterterrorism, the struggle for more open and democratic political systems, migration, and of course, kind of among the most important of America's global core interests, and that is European security. The crises that have engulfed the region and global developments over the last decade have only accentuated these important issues for the United States. Let me just run through them very, very quickly, just to give folks a sense of how important they have become and why North Africa is so important to the United States. Obviously, on energy, with just events in the last few days, in particular today, the Ukraine crisis is important. Algeria is even more important these days to Europe than it has been before. Obviously, the spike in energy prices will also help Libya, a country that needs a lot of help. But it also does the spike in energy prices will also have downside effects in these countries in terms of economic management. Second, there's a sense in Washington and apparently in Europe as well, as we just heard from Alfredo, that the threat of extremism has receded. I think that we should not feel comfortable with that. Every time that we believed that the threat of extremism has receded and it's no longer going to be something that's important to the United States, we find ourselves having to deal with some significant event with regard to extremism. I don't need to remind anybody of the op-ed in the July 2001 edition, July 2001 in the New York Times, saying that terrorism was a phenomenon that was past us, only for 5 weeks later for the 9/11 attacks to happen. I think if people think back about North Africa and the role of extremism in there, just think about Air France Flight 8969. If you don't remember it, look it up. It's a haunting precursor to what happened on 9/11. So I don't think that we should dismiss the idea of extremism being a threat both to North Africa and to the regions around it. Of course, our common American European approach to the phenomenon of extremism perhaps needs to change, but that doesn't mean that the threat is receding. Third, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya are all countries where the struggle for positive, more open, democratic and just societies have taken place, but they've also come under pressure and in many ways have reversed. We've heard Karen Sahara and after her Alfredo Conti talk about the importance of supporting change. I certainly agree that there is a place for the United States and European allies to rhetorically support change. I'm not quite sure, though, that even a concerted effort that Europe and the United States have the kind of resources available to fix politics in this part of the world. I think if the last decade would tell you anything about the domestic dynamics, is that external actors have a limited role to play, especially when the primary actors believe that their struggle is an existential one. That's not to say that Tunisians may find their way back to a transition, but it is a Tunisian story. It's not necessarily an American and European story. Fourth, migration. I don't know how to politely say this. Is North Africa Europe's backyard or front yard? Whatever it is, it's close proximity to Europe, and the phenomenon of migration is something that is extremely important, both to North African countries as well as to Europe, which leads me to, as I mentioned before, what is the most important, among the most important American global interests, and that is European security. And migration is an issue there. I think that the migration crisis of 2015 had a profound impact on politics in Europe, something that European leaders would like not to repeat, and that American leaders would not like to see repeated. It had an incredibly distorting effect on politics. But there are other, but it's not just a question of migration. It's not just a question of extremism. The efforts of other great powers in the region, whether it's China, but I think more specifically Russia, which seeks to extend its influence in the Middle East to this close proximity to Europe from North Africa. If North Africa truly is the soft underbelly of Europe, which I believe is a Churchill quote, then this is a region that is of, I think, significant importance to the United States, in a place where the United States and Europe should cooperate. The question is, what is the content of that? The content of that cooperation. I think there's a lot of talk and a lot of talk shop about what it is that we can do together. It strikes me, though, that perhaps the most productive areas where the United States and Europe can cooperate on North Africa is in migration. Certainly on Libya. Once we have gotten past 2019 and differences over Libya, there has been a actually quite remarkable way in which the United States, Europe, and the United Nations have worked to try to help Libya. But again, as I pointed out, their resources of the United States and Europe are limited. and the influence of outside actors are limited. As we see, Libya was heading towards presidential elections. They have now been delayed. I'm not someone who is a betting person, but I think it remains an open question whether those elections will actually happen. Third, the United States and Europe, particularly after today, and the consolidation of a more united NATO and a more united Europe, can work together in North Africa to counter the malign influence of Russia. This is something that I've thought about for quite some time, given the way in which the Russians have sought to extend their influence from Damascus out through out south into Egypt, and then out through North Africa, which is something that I think that everybody should look at with significant concern, especially after events of today and the last few weeks. And then finally, of course, is the question of terrorism. I think I made my views known. Vigilance against extremism is what is important here. The United States certainly pursued a global war on terrorism in a wrong-headed way after September 11th. And if you actually read U.S. government documents, there is clearly a better way to confront extremism, both around the world as well as in North Africa and the Middle East more broadly. The question is, what is the division of labor between the United States and Europe in that confrontation? And ultimately, the United States and Europe have firepower, intelligence, and police work that can be brought to bear. But ultimately, again, the question of extremism throughout the region is one in which North Africans and Middle Easterners are going to have to deal with as an internal struggle more than anything else. So I do think that there are specific areas where cooperation can take place. I think we need to be careful about kind of broad, all-encompassing ideas about how the United States and Europe are going to fix North Africa. But certainly there are these discrete areas that make sense for the United States and Europe to pursue common goals in a cooperative way. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Great intervention. Lots of thinking, lots of thoughts, and lots of questions are going to be raised by your intervention. Now we are very fortunate to have another one of the great scholars of the Middle East, from the Middle East, and we have Dalia Ghanem, who's currently a senior resident scholar at the Malcolm Carnegie Middle East Center in Beirut, Lebanon. Dalia.
Thank you, Karim. Thank you for these very kind words. Thank you for the invitation. Well, I've been asked to answer basically from my point of view, what do I think, whether I think there is a real possibility of success that an enhanced transatlantic relationship can effectively play a role in mediating the many crises that plague the region, North Africa and Middle East. Well, that's a difficult question actually, because we tend to talk about the MENA as a whole region that is all the same, but every country has its own specificities. And what's going on right now, for instance, in Lebanon, where I am based, doesn't have that much to do with what's going on in Tunisia. But of course, there are trends, and one of the trends that I am seeing right now, and I can bet money on that, is that the current situation, the socioeconomic situation in all these countries are starting to boil, and they are going to reach a point when we will probably witness a third wave of protests. We've seen the first wave in 2011 in Tunisia and Libya and Egypt, and then the second wave happened in Algeria, Sudan, and Lebanon and Iraq, and I believe there is a third wave coming. And I am not sure that the motto of this wave will be like the motto of the second wave, which was Silmiya and Hadariya, which meant peaceful and civic. So I think Europe needs to prepare to that. Now, when it comes to the transatlantic relationship, I would say that the first question to ask is where they are standing right now. Where are the EU-US relation at? Are they at a point where they can really play an effective role in the Middle East and North Africa? And when it comes to the Middle East and North Africa, I believe this is the less optimistic and encouraging part of the relations. The impact of the transatlantic collaboration on the broader Middle East remains unknown for now, while Washington is dedicated to resolving the Iranian nuclear issue through European diplomacy. Of course, lost ground is difficult to reconquer, to reclaim. European leaders remain skeptical of the US involvement in the rest of the area, but are hesitant to create their own strategy. And actually, they are also losing ground in the region. And this will be a source of concern for European security, as Stephen talked about it. And there are other actors who are consolidating their position in surrounding nations, ranging from, North Africa to the Sahel. I am thinking here about China, about Russia, but also about Turkey. I recently wrote a piece called Ankara's Maghreb Moment, when I identify how actually Turkey is having a more and more stable entry to North Africa and also to the Sahel. There is this new actor who are creating their own momentum in the region, and they are creating, the perception that the EU and the US are sidelined. They are becoming irrelevant, On the other hand, we have the US that is giving priority to China, and on the other, the EU that is giving more attention to Russia, to Russian military buildup in the East, and to the jihadist threat in the Sahel. So based on this, the call for more collaboration, in my eyes, in the MENA region sounds out of line a bit. So in this situation, both Europe and the US are very certainly condemned to work together, and they are also condemned to maintain the status quo approach for the foreseeable future. Even still, this smart course of action necessitates diplomatic agility. They are condemned to work together by necessity, because this is a region that is of great importance for both of them. And but for now, what can we say? Europeans, for instance, collectively have not demonstrated their ability to, or their agility and proactiveness to work together. Europe is essentially powerless in Syria and Yemen. When it comes to what's going on in Tunisia and Lebanon, it has been silent. Several member states like France, of course, Germany and Italy have started their own initiatives, although they have had little effect thus far. We all remember here in Lebanon the several visits that Emmanuel Macron did in Lebanon. And we do also remember how ineffective they were, and we are still where we were, even maybe a bit deeper in the crisis. Meanwhile, this strategic ineffectiveness benefits Russia, China, which are bolstering their presence and influence in the area. So I'm not going to give you numbers, because I'm sure you all have them. But a country like Russia has had a very strong foothold in North Africa. For the last decade, it has been building this foothold year after year. It has, tried to regain influence in North Africa, and Putin showed its ability to do it. If we take a country like Algeria, for instance, the relationship between the two countries, Russia and Algeria, are very strong. Algeria is a long-standing ally and is among the top 5 clients for Russian weapons, with more than 80% of its equipment being supplied by Russia. To this, you can add, China and Turkey. That is, that has to be kept in mind, because the footprint of the country in the Maghreb is very strong, and the Maghreb is the door to the African markets, being on trade, or on military equipment, and so on and so forth. So I would say, bottom line, maybe for now, as I said, there will be a statu quo because the two, countries, the US, but also the European Union, the two are not looking really in the same direction. As I said, there are other actors that are creating a momentum, and they are being clearly, the EU and the US are being sidelined.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now I can say.
Think about it.
Yeah, you've been great. The way this panel is going is exactly the way I figured in my best dreams would go, because we have seen the presentation of various points of views that seem to be in contradiction sometimes with each other. And I would like now to have a discussion among us first, and then we'll see with the Q&A if there are questions on the panel. I would like for Alfredo and Steve to sort of, I don't want to say reply to Dalia's sobering arguments, but do you have any comment regarding that? My next question would have been to you before listening to Dalia's intervention, to focus on what are the difficulties that you could foresee in the relationship between Italy and Europe and the United States. But I will adjust this question according to what Dalia said and how she presented it, and if you have any reaction to this. Just keep it as informal as you can so that we can have a more vivacious discussion.
I'll defer to Alfredo first.
Thank you, Stephen. Now, also thank you for your remarks on migration, on which I would like to come back also in my comment. To what Dalia said about the European Union, I mean, looking at it from the outside, I think it's easy to draw the conclusion that the EU is silent or powerless or divided, and member states take the initiatives, on their own. As some of you know, I had the privilege of serving also in the EU institutions as an Italian diplomat for a considerable period of my professional life, and I can tell you it's not that simple as it looks, and part also of the efforts of the Italian diplomacy, including in the MENA region, but not only, is also to let partners on the other side, on the southern Mediterranean shores, to understand and to appreciate the added value that the European Union can bring to bear. I mean, there is an old joke, among partners of the EU, saying that others used to make offers you can't refuse, and the EU makes offers you can't understand. But even if it is sometimes difficult to understand what the EU does and how it does it, this is what we are striving to have the EU involved more and more effectively in Libya, in Tunisia, but even in Lebanon. I mean, Syria is already a different file, more complicated for other reasons, while at the same time, working also at bilateral level in cooperation with other partners. For example, that is very much also the case in Libya, where we are extremely active bilaterally and in cooperation with the US, France, Germany, the UK, but also with the Libyans, to let them understand that they have to let the EU be more active, also to better manage their borders. There is both a naval mission there, there is a mission of assistance for border management, UBAM Libya. It's not easy because, the Libyans would prefer to deal with the member states rather than the obscure, technicalities of the EU programs. But that's the way to go about, and that's what probably Italy does even more than other partners. Then on migration, we have to say that we try this time to let our European partners to understand better that this is a European challenge, that we have to face it together. And just to give an idea of the magnitude of the challenge, every weekend on the Italian shores, there is the same number of migrants that were, at the Polish border at the height of the crisis with Belarus. I mean, but we can only tackle this challenge together, although this is very much something that Italy sometimes feels we are facing alone. But we know we are not alone. We just need our partners to put their, as you say, their money where their mouth is, which is sometimes not so easy.
One of the difficulties of understanding the work of the European Union is that because sometimes the local population, the Libyans, try to have a bilateral relationship in order to divide the unity of the countries. And we have seen that especially in the diverse behavior of two countries like France and Italy for many years regarding the dossier. Now it has been recompiled. There seems to be more understanding. But for many years, the various factions of the Libyan civil war used to play one against the other and take advantage of it. So that's another point of difficulty to see how effective or non-effective could be the work of the European Union. Sorry, Stephen, I didn't mean to take the word.
No, that's quite all right. That's quite all right. Just one reaction to what I thought was Dalia's insightful remarks about this, and that's something that she said right off the top, which is that the Europeans often look at the United States and are unsure or mistrustful or think that something that the United States is doing in the region is not the right approach, yet they on their own don't have the capacity to develop and implement their own kind of initiatives, especially when Washington seems determined to do things and achieve certain things. But I think that when the Europeans can be more effective when they interlock with the United States. And we've seen evidence of that. And that's why in a number of discrete areas, there may be places where Europe and the United States can work together. And I think that's the underlying theme here, which is that Europe on its own doesn't have the capacity because of some of the kind of internal challenges and is the way in which local actors seek to divide the European Union. And the United States has a certain unique capabilities that it brings to the table, but sometimes may not be entirely appropriate. So that there is this kind of question, I hate this term, this kind of force multiplier effect of the United States and the European Union cooperating. The question is finding out, rather than just saying, we need to cooperate, it would be great to achieve our common goals, is to actually discern where our interests overlap, what's important to us overlap, and how we actually can work together. I think more recent diplomacy on Libya is an example of that. I think that there's more work to be done in areas like migration, but of course Europe is divided on this on this issue. But I think what the Europeans have going for it, particularly after this morning, is the very clear interest of the United States in European stability, European freedom, in a European common market, all of those things that the United States has been working towards since the end of World War II. And that's why migration, counter-extremism, and so on and so forth may be ripe for better U.S.-European cooperation. Previously, there was nothing there was an urgency about it, but there's I think a greater urgency in recent months and days over some of these issues that quite actually don't really have all that much to do with North Africa.
Yeah, you are replying to Dalia's observation. What is the ground for collaboration? Which is another question that she put that we tend to forget. There is a grand narrative that we might like: freedom, stability, economic prosperity. But then when you apply to in concrete, that I think is what Dalia was talking about. When you go down in concrete, all this grand narrative doesn't hold. Well, so what are the ground collaboration?
I think I mentioned them. I think migration, I think counter-extremism are and American and European efforts to counter malign Russian influence in the region, I think is important. It is just take the last piece of it. The Russian intervention in Syria has given Moscow an influence around the region that it had not had for the previous 25 years. And it has built on that. Russia is selling more weaponry to Egypt than it has since the early 1970s. It has pulled, it hasn't flipped, but pulled Ankara closer to Moscow. Even the Israelis have been muted in their response to Ukraine because they need Russia in order to overfly Syria in their efforts to conduct their shadow war against Iran. And you have Russian mercenaries that have operating in North Africa, in Libya from Egypt. And these are places, this is now even more serious for the United States and Europe than it was before. So I think, again, migration, extremism, these are not anything particularly new, but there is an opportunity. And like I said, where the United States and Europe can interlock in ways, and that's the problem. That's, to me, the conceptual problem is how do we actually do this? We can be more effective together. But there are, I think, discrete areas. But I think the idea of, building some kind of, North Africa, where we can kind of fix the politics of the region is something that I think is too ambitious even for the United States and Europe, even working together.
Even unachievable, probably. Dalia, do you have a comment?
No, Karim, I think we should move on. I think at the end we align on certain things, but I would definitely insist, and this is to Alfredo, that the European Union is this big machine, and I do believe that this is an institution that is, of course, doing its best, but sometimes the machine, this mastodont, is hard to get all together and work on these issues. But I do believe that, and I think that will be the next question, that there are some EU-US efforts that can be made to mediate in very important crises that are either already there in North Africa or going to be, aggravated. And I have an idea about that, but we can come back to that later.
No, if you want to go ahead now.
Yes.
Yeah.
The second question that I've been asked is where do you think the EU-US can, intervene and can mediate? Tell us about the situation between two countries that is important in your eyes. I think when it comes to North Africa right now, the problem between Algeria and Morocco is to be taken very seriously. The first time in decades that we've seen the two countries reaching this kind of being close to a heated conflict. And then, with all objectivity that I might have as a North African scholar, I think the US move, towards under the Trump administration in December 2020, and the decision to recognize, Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara, about normalizing relationship with Israel, has been, exacerbating, again, I insist on this word, exacerbating a conflict that was there already for decades. It didn't create it, it just aggravated. Algiers was taken aback when Trump granted Morocco what they had wished for decades. And for Morocco, I think it was an irrevocable diplomatic success, and that's a fact. So, the Abraham Accords have been problematic for Algeria. And since the Abraham Accords, we can see how things have deteriorated very, very quickly between the two countries. And I think that, Algeria is not going to change its stance anytime soon when it comes to Israel and to the Palestinian problem. While it is true that there are ideological, and deeply rooted ideological consideration, there are also security ones. I talk to people within the system that are, convinced that, for Algiers, said bluntly, such accords are dangerous for national security. security and for the region as a whole. And the Moroccan-Israeli relation is perceived by Algiers as dangerous in the long run because probably the perception is that Morocco might become militarily superior to Algeria. And so there is also a contention with the U.S. over Syria. Algeria has, taken a pro-government approach when it comes to Bashar al-Assad, to Damascus, and wants to see Syria back in the Arab League. And Algiers is actually organizing the 2022 March Arab League meeting. And so I think, sometimes by trying to solve or to make a diplomatic move, things are being pushed a bit further, and this is what the Abraham Accord did. Now we've heard a lot of things, a lot of crazy things, I would say, by some neoconservative voices in Washington that went as far as saying that pushing the narrative according to which Algeria is seeking a rapprochement with Iran, and Algeria has been training some of the Iranian proxies in Algeria, which is, just doesn't hold up together if we do know that the real holder of power in Algeria are the military, and it is impossible just for the military regarding, as we know their stance regarding political Islam to have black decades, to have this rapprochement with the Islamic Republic. So again, I think this is a conflict that we are going to hear more about in 2022, and this will be difficult on the plate of the Europeans, but also on the Americans. So this is a frontier. This is two countries that need to sit together and to talk more, because they might create more imbalance in the entire region. And so I would think Morocco, Algeria problem over Western Sahara and over, the Abraham Accords need to be, looked at closer.
I agree with you. I can't agree with you more. It's exactly one of the main points I raised recently is we got to keep a lot of attention on what's going on with Algeria and Morocco and the movement. That's a question for everybody. Don't you think that is a typical case of lack of collaboration or lack of cooperation or lack of understanding between Europeans and the US? The moment the United States government sort of made the move to recognize Morocco's claims over the Western Sahara, that in exchange for Morocco's supposedly adhesion to the Abraham Accord, dangerously marginalized Algeria and sending it to a wave of radicalization and nationalism that could be extremely dangerous. What do you think? Alfredo, you wanted to say something before, though, right?
Yeah, thank you, Karim. No, just to add on areas of cooperation, certainly counterterrorism is where we are already doing a lot, and we will do, I think, even more as far as the Sahel region is concerned. I said before, when we talk about North Africa now, we can't talk about it without considering also the sub-Saharan part of it. And this is also where, Russia is increasingly active, not only Libya, but also Mali, and perhaps, wherever we are in trouble, we see Russians popping up. And this is also why we have to step up our coordination efforts. We're already doing so in the anti-Daesh coalition, where Italy and the US were working hand in hand in Rome last year, and will do also this year, of course. On the specific topic of Algeria, Morocco, I couldn't agree more on what was being said. I mean, of course, we believe that the normalization accords were very positive developments, but of course, sometimes, they open new questions, and this is where probably, the tensions between Algeria and Morocco are coming into play. Although I wouldn't blame it on, any outside actor, but of course, we have to engage more to bring the two sides, first of all, to diffuse tensions, and maybe, hopefully soon also to start talking again to each other, because of course the last thing we need is more tensions in the Northern Africa, and the potential is there for further tensions.
Yeah, thank you, Alfredo. Steve, do you have any comment?
Yeah, just I think obviously this question of Morocco and Algeria and the role of the Abraham Accords. I think the previous administration looked at the world in a very different way and saw an opportunity in which to essentially bribe the Moroccans into normalization with Israel without giving significant consideration to what the regional implications of that are. Now, of course, as I think Alfredo just implied, Morocco and Algeria have a variety of reasons in which they are at odds with each other. I also think that it's borderline on the absurd to believe that the Abraham Accords is going to turn Morocco into some sort of military powerhouse. But nevertheless, if that is in fact the thinking within Algiers, it is an outcome of this. But I think that obviously the issues between Morocco and Algeria predate the Abraham Accords. This would be a place where the United States and Europe could effectively work together to calm tensions. The problem is, do we have enough appreciation for the complexity of these issues? The Biden administration is not going to reverse the Trump administration's decision to recognize Moroccan sovereignty that was given in exchange for the Abraham Accords. And of course, there is the Russian factor in Algeria and the fact that Russia and Algeria remain quite close diplomatically and militarily. But nevertheless, that's not reason not to for the United States and Europe to seek some sort of effort to reduce tensions between those two countries.
Dalia, you have something to say, or shall I go to try to present Bill Lawrence, an esteemed colleague?
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead with William.
Okay, what Will is saying is that there is excellent cooperation between the European and the Americans. Excellent cooperation in many places, like the UN approach to Western Sahara, coordination on Tunisia. There's excellent cooperation on Libya, but they are all very, very, very ineffective. So he asks, shouldn't the main goal be improving the effectiveness of the approach rather than just coordinating on less effective approaches? And is it possible that in some cases bilateral pressure might yield greater results than just coordination on weaker levels of policy? I think my main contention is that the weakness of policy positions are the main problem, not the coordination of those relatively weak positions. So what I think Will asking, should we have a total turn upside down, instead of looking at coordination, looking at the effectiveness of what each policy is, and where the two in agreement can be more effective than each state on its own.
I'll start and then we can go down, since I don't necessarily disagree. I think that if our policy is to fix the politics of Tunisia and Libya, I think then our policy is going to be weak, because I think it's ultimately up to Libyans and Tunisians to fix their politics, and there's not a whole hell of a lot that we can do. At a rhetorical level, we can say that we support transitions to democracy, et cetera, and say not nice things about regional authoritarians. But it's a pretty weak hand to play at this point. I think it's a lesson that we should learn over the course of the last 10 years. There are discrete, as I pointed out, I think there are other discrete areas that are better, where coordination might be more effective. Thanks.
Dalia, Alfredo?
I would only echo what Stephen just said. I mean, from an official perspective, I mean, there is this, the slogan on Libya, for example, is that the transition must be Libyan-led and Libyan-owned. But this is not only a slogan, this is a reality that if we respect the sovereignty of a country, and the same applies to Tunisia, we cannot prescribe them what to do. The one thing we can do, and this is where coordination is less irrelevant than it looks, is that by showing a unity of purpose and also actions consistent with those display of unity, we can prevent the local actors from playing the one international player off against the other. And, you know, we have seen in the past that when we are disunited, we are even less effective than when we are. So unity is an essential condition, although by no means a sufficient one. And, you know, the success of those transitions have to come from within.
True, that's absolutely true. We are reaching the deadline for our time at our disposal. I would like to conclude with asking you one general question. Out of your guts, of your instinct, what do you think is the real threat of Islamist extremism in North Africa, in particular moment? It is changing the face. It is attaching to the Sahel. It is moving in its ideological. Is it not going to be a threat for Europe anymore, but just it's moving towards Africa? How do you see the evolution or involution of the various movements that call themselves political Islam or Islamism, or whatever you want to define them? And on this, we can conclude our very exciting panel, I should say.
Yes, I will say, but there is also Karen who wanted to say something.
Of course.
Alfredo, thank you very much. So
sorry, Karen.
Just in response to a couple of the remarks. No worries. Just in response to a couple of the remarks about the limitations of what the U.S. can and can't do in a country, frankly, I couldn't agree more with you, because it's, as Alfredo and anyone that's ever, I think, done diplomatic work and talked about these things, we have the very limited ability to make things happen. But yet, I'll be very honest with you, on a regular basis, I hear from think tanks in Washington, from other parts of the government, you're not doing enough. You're not fixing it. You're not getting that government back to the democratic path. You're not making elections happen. This is the discourse that I get. So it's really interesting to hear what Steve has to say about the limitations of U.S. influence and power, which I agree.
Become an outlier in Washington.
We want to fix the world. Okay, maybe my career's over now. I don't know. But it's just, we do try. We try to find that balance, as what Alfredo has said. We want to provide the international support. We want to be an honest broker and a sounding board, because let's be honest, a lot of political discourse that takes place, it is based on a lot of very deeply ingrained cultural elements that form that country. And it's tribal, it's regional, it's a lot of different things, sometimes masquerading for political discourse when it's not. It's basically the quest for political primacy for a certain region, a certain faction, a certain political family, whatever. We've all, I think, pretty much lived that. But we have to find that balance and see what we can do. It would be presumptuous for us to do otherwise, but I'm just pointing out how interesting it is that there is still that feeling that if you really try hard enough, you'll get those elections in Libya, or you'll get this thing in Tunisia, or this will get solved. No, these have to be authentic, genuine, domestically agreed upon solutions. Because like I've said before, we're all going to get on a plane and go home. We're all going to go home to our countries, to our capitals, to our families, but they must live with the decisions that their elites and their political body makes. So when we look at Libya, as what Alfredo has said, they need to make sure that they can live with that decision. It's not going to trigger violence, that their political futures are assured. So there's just a lot of different things in there. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir, but we do find that there is the opportunity to diffuse some of the tension in Libya and others when sides need to maybe just separate for a little bit. But you've all probably been following the work that Stephanie Williams has been doing. It's pretty amazing, former US diplomat. And so we want to be supportive of that. So it's always a balance of when you can do some good or when you're just interfering and being inefficient. Thank you.
Very well. I agree. Thank you very much again, Karen. Thank you for your intervention. Is there any reply, any last comment from Dalia or Alfredo or Steven?
No, the remark.
The question that the participant asked about the terrorist threat, I think really broadly and very quickly, I think Morocco and Algeria will continue to a certain extent to remain those islands of stability when it comes to the terrorist threat. I think Tunisia and Libya are the most, those that we should look at. Of course, the Sahel region and Mali are also, have been, this quagmire for years. But again, when it comes to the extremists, and I will end on this, to the violent radicalization or jihadism, call it whatever you want. As long as we will see countries in which, there is this level of corruption, of bad governance, of hagra, as we call it in Algeria, mistreat of young, of unemployment, of lack of perspective, the jihadist threat is going to continue and to remain and to expand, because jihadism will continue to offer these amazing opportunities for some young that will see them, as an amazing, professional opportunity, a great adventure, and so on and so forth. And as long as North Africa will continue to, to have these conditions to create those jihadists, Europe will continue to suffer from it. Stephen said it earlier. We Algerians, we will never forget the Black Decade, but I think the French will never forget also the, the Airbus that was hijacked in 1994, and also the attack on French territory in 1995 in Place de l'Étoile and elsewhere. So again, the Europeans are also, not safe. The idea that Europe is still shielded from that, I think, died when Libya fell and the Gaddafi fell, and we have we all know what happened after that. So it's really connected. The two regions are connected, and whatever happened in the north of Africa, will have repercussions in Europe.
Karim, can I just jump in for a second? I think that I just want to second what Dalia said, but I want to add another wrinkle, another dynamic to what is happening that's going to affect this, that has a potential to affect this, the extremist phenomenon in the region. Look at what has happened to political Islam and Islamist parties around the region. They took a beating in Morocco. They have suffered at the hands of what is a palace coup in Tunisia. They've been run down, jailed, chased out in Egypt. The standard bearer of political Islam of the most recent era, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, is under siege, essentially, because of his own political and economic missteps, and is now having to recalibrate his foreign policy and going to kiss the ring of people like Mohammed bin Zayed. He's going to go to Saudi Arabia. It's going to be extremely awkward. The Israeli president is going to go meet him. It strikes me that when Islamist parties are under siege, under threat, not doing well, it provides an opportunity for extremists to say, you see, we're right. Yeah. It adds to a narrative. It adds to their appeal, which is why I think the idea in Washington and elsewhere that the extremist threat is receding is not a good assumption for American or European policymakers. Thanks.
I agree. The loyal Islamists in Morocco doesn't mean that Islamists are disappearing. They just move somewhere else.
Exactly.
They gave up their political because it's useless, because it's not going to do anything, and they'll probably go back to the kind of groups like that, or the former, the old Sheikh Yassin and so on. So, Alfredo, you want to say something? So you had your hand. Alfredo.
wonder if he
Did he leave
left.
us? Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Kareem, can I just jump in really quickly?
Sure.
Just to respond to what Steve said, you know, I don't know who they're talking to, but I don't think there's a lot of people that follow terrorism, you know, very, very closely that think the threat is receding. There may be territory that has been, you know, rid of, whether it's ISIS Sinai, whether it's in southern Libya or others. But I think anyone that follows it knows that it's just, they're going to reconstitute somewhere else. It's a quite effective, very devoted network. So I don't think anyone thinks that it has gone away. It may have gone away somewhere else for now, but it has a staying power that is quite considerable. Over. Let me turn it over to Alfredo. Sorry.
Alfredo, are you with us?
Yes. Sorry, I had to disappear 1 second. No,
and that was exactly the second we called you.
This happens. Now, I guess the question was about you know, when where there is the threat of Islamism, and I would echo what I think Dalia was saying before. Wherever there is you know, a fragility or you know, failure of governance, this is why we have to be committed in supporting those processes where they are going, and you know, making sure with all the limits that I pointed out and Karen also underlined, that those processes go to the right outcome. You know, because everywhere there is you know, poor governance or failed governance, this is where you know, there is a vacuum which you know, extremists or whatever the destabilizing actors are filling up. So this is where we have to be committed, and we can only do it by joining forces and doing it together.
Very well. Well, thank you very much, all of you. We are unfortunately running out of time. This has been really a wonderful debate, and I'd like to thank all the speakers who participated in this panel, Steven, Dalia, Alfredo. Thank you again to our partner, the U.S. Embassy in Rome. And I'd like to thank particularly Marzia Benini for helping us make this event possible, and Sergio Smitham for your welcoming remarks. Thank you very much, Karen, for your remarks. Thank you, guys. This has been one of the best panels I ever had a chance to attend, and I'm very grateful for your insightful and deep and honest remarks. Thanks. Thank you all very much again, and hope to see you soon in one of our events. Thanks a lot.
All right, everybody, take care. Good to see you. Best regards to friends and colleagues in Rome. Bye.
Thanks you.
All right.